Your phone says 5G. Your download says Wally dial-up. Before you blame the phone, that icon isn't a speedometer. It's a name tag, and 3 completely different networks are all wearing it. You're standing still, full bars, 5G glowing, and the map just spins. You didn't do anything wrong. Your phone is telling the truth and disappointing you at the same time. Oh, and the reason is hiding in plain sight in the word 5G itself. Here's what that icon actually promises. It means your phone found a 5G network and latched onto it. Well, that's the entire claim. And on some phones it stays lit, even while your data quietly rides 4G. Not how fast, not how busy, not which slice. Because 5G was never one thing. It's a family of 3 radio bands with wildly different personalities, and they all get to wear the same 2-character badge. And while we're here, the bars next to it aren't much better. The signal bars are a rough read on how well your phone hears the tower, loudness mostly, and there's no standard for what a bar even means. Every phone maker picks its own thresholds, so 2 phones side by side can disagree. What they don't tell you is how much room is left on that tower, how fast the connection behind it is, or whether the tower's own link back to the internet is jammed. You can stand under a tower with 5 perfect bars and still watch a page refuse to load. Loud is not the same as fast. And the difference between those 3 is something you already know in your bones. Think about your neighbor's music through the wall. You never hear the singer. You hear the bass. Every single time the low notes come through, the high notes stop at the drywall. That isn't the speaker, that's physics. Different machinery from radio, same direction. Low frequencies are long, lazy waves that bend around corners and push through a wall. High frequencies are short and sharp, and they get eaten by whatever's in the way. Hold on to that because it explains everything else. Slice 1, low band, below 1 gigahertz, the base notes of the wireless world. One tower reaches for miles. It walks through your walls, into the elevator, out to the farm road. That's why you see 5G in places that never had good anything. The catch is room. Down there, the spectrum is narrow and crowded. There just isn't much lane to go around. Fantastic coverage. Speeds that feel suspiciously like the LTE you already had. Slice 2, mid-band, a few gigahertz, bands like C-band around 3.7 and the 2.5 range. This is the actual upgrade. Enough reach to cover a neighborhood, enough room to move real data. When somebody tells you 5G changed their life, this is the slice they're standing in. It's also the one your icon will never admit you're not on. Slice 3, what the industry calls millimeter wave, 24 gigahertz and up, gloriously, ridiculously fast. And it has the range of a house cat. A tree stops it. The coated energy-saving glass in a modern window stops it. Your own hand, wrapped around the phone, stops it. So it lives where crowds stand still. Stadiums, arenas, a few downtown blocks. Almost certainly not where you're standing right now. So the obvious question, if mid-band is the good stuff, why isn't it everywhere? Because it was already occupied. That stretch of spectrum had been doing another job for decades. Satellite feeds raining television down onto the big dishes at cable headends and local stations. You can't just take it. The bottom slice of it had to be cleared, licensed, and auctioned, with the satellite operators squeezed up into what was left. And carriers paid over $80 billion for the privilege in the biggest spectrum auction in American history. And this July, regulators voted to do it again, stretching that same band up past 4 gigahertz, with the auction due by 2027. The reason the good slice is thin where you live isn't engineering, it's real estate. Now, the twist that makes the icon almost mischievous. Sometimes your 5G isn't running on 5G lanes at all. There's a technique called dynamic spectrum sharing. It lets one tower run 4G and 5G on a single channel, splitting it slot by slot instead of giving 5G a lane of its own. Your phone connects with 5G signaling, so the badge lights up honestly, but the road underneath is the old LTE highway. Carriers leaned on this hard in the early rollout, and parts of the nationwide layer still run that way. Same icon. The speed you had in 2019, sometimes worse. And then there's everybody else. A tower's capacity isn't yours, it's the whole block's split live, and where your plan sits in the priority queue decides who feels it first. Lunch rush at the coffee shop, halftime at the stadium, 6 p.m. on the train platform. Same tower, same slice, same phone, and the whole thing crawls. Nothing broke. You're just sharing a road that got busy. Okay, steelman time. The easy version of this story is the carriers are lying, and that isn't quite fair. Here's the honest case for the Icon. Your phone genuinely is connected to a 5G network. The signaling really is 5G. Even on a shared lane, the 5G side of that connection is real engineering, not a sticker. It just can't outrun the lane it's borrowing. Give that same radio real spectrum, and it does pull ahead. And there's no agreed way to cram "you're on low band at rush hour" into 2 characters on a status bar. The Icon isn't a lie, it's just answering a completely different question than the one you're asking. And if that sounds cynical, know that it already happened once. Back in 2019, one US carrier pushed a software update that changed the Icon on millions of phones from LTE to 5GE, E for evolution, a name it had been using since 2017. There was no 5G in it anywhere. The carrier had genuinely upgraded those markets, real 4G engineering, faster on paper, but every rival was doing the same work without renaming it. The update changed the letters on the screen, not the radio. A rival carrier sued and settled without getting a thing changed. A second rival took it to the industry's own advertising review board, which said the name would mislead people and told them to drop it. The ruling covered the advertising, though, not the Icon on your phone. So the badge stayed. That Icon wasn't measuring the network. It was measuring the marketing department. One prediction, and it's mine. Blame the cat, not the FCC. When 6G arrives, that badge will light up early, and often, long before the fast part reaches your street. Marketing loves a fresh number. I'll say it plainly. The badge always sprints ahead of the network. So here's what to actually check, and it takes 10 seconds. 1. Read the fine print next to the Icon. UCUW, a little plus sign. That suffix is the tell that you're on the good mid-band slice. Plain 5G all by itself usually means low band. 2. Pull up your carrier's coverage map and look for the premium words, ultra capacity, ultra wide band, over your actual address, not your city. 3. Watch the clock. If it only crawls at noon and at 6, that isn't your phone. That's a crowd. And here's the freeing part. Most of the time, it genuinely isn't your phone, your case, or some setting you forgot. You're on a long, lazy wave, or a borrowed lane, or a busy hour. No amount of restarting fixes physics. Knowing which slice you're standing in is the difference between troubleshooting and just waiting for better coverage. So, who owns those fast mid-band lanes, and why is the good stuff so hard to reach? Governments auction that spectrum off for billions, and that fight is a whole story of its own. It's coming to this channel. Follow the cat so you're here when it drops. Links below. The bars measure hope. I read the filing so you don't have to.
And that's the quick version. If you want the deeper history behind stuff like this, I've got a whole channel for that. From smoke to signal, links below. See you next time.